Welcome to the Playdate Podcast, bringing you stories from game developers, designers, and the team behind Playdate, the little yellow game console with a crank. I'm Krista Mergen, and this week's episode has a special format. Oom and Pullfrog are two standout games that launched in catalog last year, and I really wanted to get the stories on both. But instead of creating an episode for each of the games, I decided to have both games creators play each other's games and then interview each other about them. This conversation was recorded back in May of 2024, and I mostly tried to stay out of it, but you know me. I did edit it a bit to tighten it up and remove filler words, and spoiler alert, this episode does contain spoilers for Pullfrog, Oom, and Omaze, and Doom Eternal. Okay, not really, but it does get mentioned, and I thought it'd be funny to throw it in there. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to them now and let them introduce themselves and their games. Enjoy!
Hi, my name is JP, and I am half of Amano Games with my friend Mario Carballo. And I am in charge mostly of art and animation. I do a little bit of audio and music. And I also co-design games with Mario.
Hello, I'm Mario. I'm the other half of Amano Games. I'm the programmer and also designer of our games. And I mostly do that. I also took charge of the website.
Hi, I'm Gregory. I'm sole developer. I made this game Oom, which is spiritual successor to Omaze, which is the season game. It's very unconventional game, I think. It's kind of a dungeon crawler where you move and shoot on a beat. So it's kind of a dungeon crawler, but not really. It's kind of a rhythm game, but not really. So something in between of the genres. It's definitely a puzzle because there are puzzle elements, but also I know that it's good to describe the game something meets something. So if we're talking about Oom, it's Crypt of the Necrodancer meets Osmos.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
So Pullfrog is a twist on a classic block-falling puzzle game where you take control of a little frog that uses its tongue to move the pieces around and try to clear lines. It has power-ups and some hidden secrets in it, and if you're a fan of falling puzzle-like games, I think you're gonna like it.
I have many questions.
Oh, I have many questions as well.
First of all, you're based in Mexico, right?
Yes.
You're the first game developers that I know from Mexico. And I would like to know any of your gaming background, but I prepared a cool question for that, which is connected to your game. Do you remember how did you play Tetris for the first time?
If you're listening to this podcast, I probably don't need to tell you what Tetris is, but just in case, Tetris is the OG falling block game, created by Soviet developer Alexei Pajitnov, where you move and rotate falling blocks called tetraminos to complete rows and score points. The version created for Nintendo's Game Boy was one of the best-selling video games of all time. Okay.
I can answer that. I was probably 5 years old. My parents gave me a Game Boy, and it had Tetris. I was fairly new to video games. I think I had an NES, and I only had Mario, so Tetris, I think, was the second game I played. But yeah, I think I was 5-6 years old when I played Tetris for the first time. It was a present from my parents.
Nice. So you actually had Nintendo, real Nintendo consoles in Mexico?
Yeah, we got a lot of that. We got some bootleg Nintendo. It was like a Famicom. We called it the Family. It was called the Family. And a lot of people had that. But also, being so close to the US, we got a lot of Nintendo, like classic NES and Super Nintendo a little bit down the line.
Yes, Nintendo's original game console was called the Family Computer, or Famicom, and it was redesigned and released a few years later as the Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES.
I do remember my first time playing Tetris was in one of those large displays that had 99 games inside of one.
Yeah, same for me.
Yeah, I mean, because they were cheap and easy to get, and also because my parents didn't like me playing video games. So they were I don't know, everything that was handheld was not a video game for them. I don't know how the rules worked, but something along those lines, or maybe because the battery didn't last long and then I couldn't play for too long, but they allowed me to play those kind of games, and that was the first time that I played Tetris. I actually didn't play on the Game Boy until 20s or something.
Mm-hmm. Everything in handheld is a toy. It's not a,
Yeah, exactly.
It's not a game.
Yeah. I think it was also because then, when we were in a party or something, then I would just be the kid in the corner playing his Game Boy or his little toy, and then I wouldn't be disturbing the adults.
What about you? Like, what's your background making games?
If we're talking about my childhood, I was born and raised in Ukraine, and we absolutely didn't have Nintendos or something like that. We had only knockoffs, and we even had this Soviet arcade knockoffs. And actually, the Pong version on Soviet arcades is much better than the original, I think. So if we talk about Tetris, yeah, the only way how I played it is this cheap 99 in 1 games. They had Tetris, they had some race cars, but they looked like Tetris too. So if we're talking about my gaming habits, my first proper console was Nintendo Switch. I started very late. Before that, it was only PC gaming for me, and we also had the computer clubs where you can go and play games. Not many people had actual PC at home, so we had a play date after school.
We all see what you did there.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah, for me it was something similar because we didn't have consoles at home. I was allowed to play on the computer for a while, and then on the recesses on school, I was also like, if you answer the question correctly, you get a credit, and if you got 10 credits, then you can spend them on the library to play in the computer. So I played a lot of Flash games, and it happened to me a lot that sometimes, like later on, I would play a classic game like Zelda or Metroid, and I would be like, oh, this is like the Flash game that I used to play. And that was my original like reference of some genres, like the Flash game.
Bootleg.
Yeah.
And could you imagine when you were 5 years old, when you were playing Tetris, that you will make your own Tetris at some point?
Growing up, I always wanted to make games, and I very clearly remember thinking that watching cartoons and stuff, I had an idea of how animation was made. So I thought that video games were made just like that. They would like draw every possibility, kind of like the way a Mr. Game & Watch works. So the makers of the game would draw every single possibility, and then you would have to choose what. So it seemed to me like an overwhelming amount of work. And throughout my life, I always played games, but I had no idea about development. It wasn't until after I became like a full grown adult that I got into games. And even then, it was kind of hobby-like. So I didn't really think I would make a game similar to Tetris that felt fun and that didn't feel like I was just copying Tetris. So yeah, making Pullfrog was a fantastic experience. I'm very glad we could do like a twist on the genre that felt good.
Yeah. And I've seen the first version of Pullfrog was made in Pico 8.
Yes.
Pico 8 is an emulator and game engine created by Lexalawful Games that mimics the limited sound and graphics capabilities of 80s game consoles without being tied to any specific hardware, making it a fantasy console.
And I find a lot of similarities between Pico 8 fantasy console and Playdate, the real console, because it has lots of limitations. It also uses Lua. I'm not sure if you actually made it in Lua, but it is a possibility for Pico 8. So can you expand a little bit? How is it like to develop it for Pico 8 and then porting it to Playdate?
I was actually thinking about that today because I was remembering one podcast that I used to listen, which is Scorbejen in Spanish. And they talked a lot about how it was developing for consoles and how that is kind of lost. Because before, you had some technical limitations that made the game in a certain way. And I never understood that really because like I didn't have that experience, or I didn't have the technical knowledge to understand how a game could be different based on like a CPU or like the resources that you had in the console. And like when we started doing Pico 8 games, I started to understand it. Like, oh, we have this color palette, and that's why the Pico 8 games all look cohesive, and it's like they all belong to this fantasy console. And the same thing is happening on the Playdate, where obviously you have the screen, so everything is one bit, but also you have like the tools, like the SDK, and then you have a bunch of games that use the tools that are provided by the Playdate to make their games. So you have a nice effects, like the dithering patterns and all the tools that are provided by the SDK. And it's really fun. I didn't expect to ever make a game in that way. And even like listening to that podcast, I remember they were complaining about how that was not possible anymore. So I'm really happy that we have experienced that. The games that we're doing, they are driven and the design is really based on the platform, and that gives them a really unique feeling. And you can see the difference in Pullfrog because it's like the limitations of the Pico 8 are really different from the limitations from the Playdate, and you can see that conversion going through in those two versions of the same game. I have really liked working that way.
I was playing your Pico 8 version, And I have to say the Playdate version is much, much better. Like, you can tell that you invested a lot in that.
Yeah, we put a lot of special care into the feel and the controls in the Playdate version because the Pico 8, it was our first game we made together, just the two of us, in the context of Amano, maybe. And we were also kind of like learning the ropes on the Pico 8 system, which for that system, the limitations are that you don't have a lot of texture space, but you have a lot you can do like with computing. And with the Playdate, it's a little bit backwards. You have limitations in terms of performance, and you have to be careful with that, but you have all the textures and sound and the memory you can use. You can make it as big as you want. You might try to not do that because like the limited storage on the device, but we could go all out in making it feel good and adding cutscenes and adding extra like graphical details, and that was important for us.
I have a question kind of relative to this. So I'm wondering, like, you're one of the first ones to make a second game on the Playdate, and I want to know how different is that, like, from working in a Season 1 game where you don't share a lot of stuff and there's not a lot of people that know even what the Playdate is or how games are in the Playdate, to working on a second game where you already have the catalog and have this, not like massive, but we now have like 100 games in the catalog or something. So how did that change your process, or how was it different working on the second game?
I didn't change my actual process that much because that's the only way how I know how to make games. But I definitely was trying to fix some mistakes or problems that I encountered on Omaze. For example, I'm making crank-centric games. That's what fires me up. I love Playdate the crank. I love alternative controls. And for me, Playdate is like alternative control console because of the crank. So with the crank, I realized that it is much better to control your character if your absolute position of the crank corresponds to the player's position. I couldn't have that on Omaze. That's why sometimes people, they don't know which directions they will go. They think in terms of left and right, but not clockwise and counterclockwise. So
Of course.
when you're in the down position, like 180 degrees, you're not really sure where you will go if you rotate it clockwise, for example. And it's kind of cool that people can rewire their brain in the end. And in the end, they have this cool skill to think in terms of clockwise, counterclockwise. But for some people, I guess it's too hard. So I learned a lot from Hyper Meteor.
Hyper Meteor is another Season 1 Playdate game. There's a link in the show notes.
And one more game, Star Sled by Greg Maletis.
Star Sled is also a Season 1 Playdate game, created by Panic's own head of Playdate and special projects, Greg Maletic.
And actually, Greg added that absolute position after he encountered the same stuff that I encountered, as far as I understood. So yeah, that's one of the main takeaways that I fixed on But in regards of the process, it's absolutely the same. I generate everything with the code, both sound and visuals. I don't have any sprites besides, launch card animations or something like that. And I have this weird technique where I'm solo developer and I'm not finishing a lot of games for various reasons, but mostly because I'm lazy.
It happened.
So all of my games that I've actually finished had the same pattern. Like, I'm actively developing them for the first period of development, and I put some very important groundwork for them, like pillars, and then they kind of develop themselves. And I just need to show up and see what the game wants to be. And it might sound artsy or pretentious, but actually it's very practical because in the end, it's easier for me to finish the game because it kind of develops itself and I'm just showing up for work and it's done at some point.
I can relate to that a lot. I feel like as a kind of archaeology, like you have to lay down the groundwork. I don't know that it happened so much that way with us with Pullfrog, but in the game we're currently developing, it's rules-based. Once you start setting up the base and the rules, a lot of things just start like, it feels like they're happening on their own, even though you're actively directing them to happen. But yeah, it's like that feeling of discovering the game once you have the base. I don't know. I don't think it's pretentious or weird at all. I think it's very relatable to what a lot of developers go through while discovering their game, even though they're making it. Sounds funny.
Yeah, but it feels like magic at some point.
Absolutely.
Like you're the vessel that the game transcends through. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, for sure.
And for both teams, part of discovering what the games wanted to be also happened through playtesting.
Yeah, for me, it's happening in different ways. It's happening during the playtest where I see, that something doesn't click with people or something does. But sometimes you just sit in front of a computer and it's just the next day and you play one level and it's like obvious what the next level will be.
For us, I think it depends on the game. Like, for example, in Pullfrog, one of the things that I think is like the cranking to speed up the game, which is something that we did right at the end. And that was because we play tested it and it was like, oh, it's really slow at some point. Like when you already know how to play, the first pieces are really slow and it can get boring at the beginning. So we tried a couple of things, like in the settings, you can change the initial level or whatever. But we have this thing, the crank, that we always wanted to use. We just didn't know how. And I think it was JP who had the idea that it was like, what if we speed up the pieces falling with the crank? And it was completely because of people playing it and us playing it as well. It was like, oh, it's too slow at the beginning, but we can speed it up because the game is already hard. So if we make it faster at the beginning, for people who haven't played it for hours and hours, it's going to be too hard.
Yeah, speeding up with the crank on your game, it actually feels really nice because at some point when you're already at that level of skill, the game is too slow for you. You feel like, yeah, I'm good. I'm already speeding up the game. It feels very satisfying, I have to say.
Oh, nice.
But in the game that we're making now, and one thing that happens to us is that sometimes I would make a system and put it out there, and then I will wake up the next day and see what JP did with it, which is really nice. Because sometimes it's like, oh, I had no idea that you could do this with the thing that I just did, but JP found a way of doing what he wanted with this new rule set that he has in our tool belt. And that has been really nice with this latest game, and also happened with another game that we were doing where we already have like a level editor. So sometimes we would just get like a GitHub notification of the other person pushed something and the title was like a new level or something. And then it was like, I was excited just to see what new thing is there in the game to the next day. So that's a really nice experience.
So I'm curious about the inception of the Pullfrog. Specifically, did it come to you, we're gonna make a Tetris game with the thing running around? Or we're gonna make a game about the frog in the Tetris?
So I think, if I remember correctly, the origin of Pullfrog is we are part of a Pico 8 development club where there was a monthly theme and we would work on the game for a month. And so for that month, the theme was frogs and cactus, I believe. So we're like, okay, we're going to make a game with a frog. And this is like my first attempt at programming. I'd been watching some Lazy Devs tutorials to learn Pico 8. So I started doing the basis for the platforming. I was just like learning the ropes, right? So I wanted to do like a very basic platformer and I started coding the first part. And then Mario was like helping me out and teaching me. In the end, he took hold of the whole programming part and I focused on the art. The idea was to have some falling cactus blocks. You were like controlling a little frog and the cacti would squish you. I played this game called Super Puzzle Platformer at one point where it's kind of the same thing. You're like controlling a character and blocks are falling. It's similar. The concept is a little bit based on that. I always loved that game and I wanted to do something that was similar in spirit. But yeah, the theming comes from the group thing and the idea of having a falling blocks game came from, I think, since everything in Pico 8 is kind of like blocky, it was just kind of a no-brainer. It kind of guided itself, as we were talking before, it kind of guided itself into being that.
Also, what happened was that we wanted to do a platformer. I think that was the main idea. Like, we had done other games before, but this was like our first attempt at doing like movement, and that felt good. So we were researching a lot about platforming and, reading the Celeste code.
Celeste is a platformer that's now available on a variety of consoles, but which was originally created for Pico 8 as part of a game jam by developers Maddie Thorson and Noel Berry.
And doing a bunch of iteration on the movement. And the falling block pieces idea was also, if I remember, there were the eyes, the idea of the eyes. The cacti were falling down and you had to collect the eyes with the tongue without them hurting you. But it was kind of a complicated idea. And then when we were working on Pico 8, it has like an integrated map editor, and that made it really easy to lay out the blocks. And I think just like normally we would go to that direction that the blocks were in the Tetris shapes. Tetrimonias? What's the name of the
Tetriminos.
Tetriminos, yeah.
I love that those shapes have a special name and that we all know that special name. Okay.
And it was just like, it's fun to do them. So we were doing it and they were falling. And that's one day it was like, what if you pull the blocks and arrange them in the scenario? Like, we didn't even knew if that was a good idea. We just were like, let's try it and see how it goes. And then, yeah, everything exploded after that in that direction.
It's great because I have to say that I'm jealous of your character because it fits so well into the gameplay. And my process is always I start with the gameplay and then I come up with the character. That's why all my characters are kind of a geometric shapes.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys, you just came up with the perfect character because I was thinking first it was the game with the guy running around the Tetris and he has a slingshot and something like that. But then you came up with this perfect character because the frog, first of all, it jumps and then it eats the flies with pulling its tongue, and it's kind of perfect for this playdate. And while we're talking about the characters, can I go into the little spoilers for your game?
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah.
Okay, so basically your game, it's not only Pullfrog, but you have many different characters, not only Frog. And you have this chameleon, you have this weird triangular guy, but then, and I'm not gonna be spoiling it more, but only one more character, you have a bird.
Yes.
And then your Pullfrog becomes Pushbird, and it transforms the gameplay completely.
Mm-hmm.
How did you come up with that? And I didn't unlock any other characters, so don't spoil it for me.
Sure. So when we made Pullfrog, everybody complained, why isn't it Pushfrog? Why aren't you pushing the pieces? I don't like to pull the pieces. It feels weird. Well, not everybody, but a lot of people, we got complaints. And we were very, very obstinate, very decided that we were not going to change that. We liked Pullfrog. We liked how the mechanic worked. It's a little bit weird reaching the edges, like pulling the pieces into a corner makes it a little bit hard. And that's, I think, where most people's complaints were coming from. But we liked the gameplay. So one of our first ideas was one of the power-ups in the game was going to turn you into Pushfrog, and you were going to be able to push pieces around for a while, or maybe switch around the gameplay. But that kind of felt weird, changing it on the fly, like mid-game. So once we started adding characters, and first, since the original Pico 8 version, we had the first three characters. You mentioned the chameleon, the pyramid guy, and the Pullfrog. Those guys control kind of exactly the same as the Pico 8 version. We had slight changes in the variables so that one is a little bit more floaty in the jumps, and then the other one has a faster tongue, so it makes the gameplay a little bit different, but not radically. So once we started adding more characters, or the idea of having more characters, we thought, well, maybe we could turn Pushfrog into Pushbird. So yeah, the character of Burb is actually a response to the Pushfrog squad
Friction.
out there.
Fascinating.
Yeah, and it was that. And also, we like Pullfrog because we think it feels better to pull the pieces. It's hard to explain, but I do believe that the feeling of pulling, for some reason, feels better than the feeling of pushing. At least in the context of Pullfrog. But at the end of the day, we also wanted to know, like, what would happen, right? It's a question that we wanted to answer, and it wasn't that hard to implement once we had everything laid out. So I remember the moment, like, that I told JP, this means we can have Pushfrog. And then it was a matter of looking, like, what character would be the best one to do it. And that's why we did it there. And we have said this in other places, and I think it's always like people, once they know it, they appreciate it a little bit more. But we do a lot of things in the game to make sure that more pieces fall in the sides. So even though that it's harder to get the pieces to the complete limits of the board, the logic is weighted so that more pieces spawn in the sides. But even like all the things that we have done, and still the feeling is that it's unfair because it's harder to get the pieces on the sides. I don't know if there's a better solution to the ways that we have done it. But it has always been a way of designers, maybe, like our job is finding a way to not have that question in the game.
Yeah.
I don't know what the players prefer. But yeah, it was mainly because we wanted to answer that question, like what would happen if instead of pulling is pushing, for our sake and for other people's sake as well.
This design is very in the spirit with the original Tetris, because in original Tetris, when you play it on a high skill level, you're also waiting for this L block to fall at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something you cannot influence. You just wait for that and build on the side. I'm just waiting for the side blocks to fall, and I'm building in between. So it feels natural to the Tetris game, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. It has a very close similarity to that for sure. And like while we're in the theme of like controls and difficulty and balancing, I wanted to ask you, Gregory, about because I feel like I played Omaze and I played and I find a difficult game, a very rewarding game, but difficult in its controls, which I think at the core of the gameplay, I think it's there and it's quite balanced. But did you have any issues playtesting or like getting feedback like maybe it's too hard or this is difficult or what has been your experience with like player feedback from the controls in
It's very controversial because my girlfriend and her sister, they cannot play at all. They don't go past the first room. I was so in love with this idea of movement, and first time when I showed it to them, I was so scared because it doesn't click for some people. I don't know. But then I showed it to other players. It was flawless. So I don't know. You just pick your audience, I guess. I always think about my games. What would I like to play? And that's what I would do. And I hope if I will do it well enough, other people will find the game and play it and enjoy it. But in terms of difficulty curve, I think it's very well balanced because I was bothering many people to play it as the game. But in terms of basic controls, they are very unconventional and they might to get some time to use to.
Yeah, no, I agree. I can relate to that.
But I think it's worth it. Like, I don't know. I love both games, and they're definitely one of my favorites on the Playdate. The movement of is like the moment when you understand it, it's just like, oh, this is so elegant. Like, in the first 10 seconds of the gameplay, I just think some people find it harder or easier, but everybody appreciates, like, the elegance of the game and the design. I really enjoyed, like, playing even the crank docking and undocking. I was listening to the other episode of the podcast, and you talked a little bit about it, and it was like, yeah, I really like that this game uses the crank docking and undocking as one of the inputs of the game and one of the main inputs of the game. So I wanted to ask that. Are you thinking of those things since the beginning? For example, the map and how you were going to draw it in this, like the UI in general of the game? Or was that something that came up at the end of the development?
The map was the breakthrough, actually. Because before that was without map, and that's why it didn't have an actual scope. But once I realized that it will be a map 9 by 9, 89 levels and 81 rooms, and then everything fell into place. Like I knew that there will be like 3 pickups, and that's when the magic started to happen, that one we were talking about. This was the final piece, the final pillar when the game manifested itself, and that's it. After that, I didn't work.
How long did you work on
I'm not sure. From the very first idea, oh, that's what I want to do, maybe a year or something, but I had lots of break in between.
Nice.
So, I don't know, netto time, probably 8 months, 9 months, something like that.
Wow, that's impressive. It feels like such as Mario said, an elegant game, like the way you designed the backtracking and the navigation through the maps and stuff. I don't think my brain can even like work on making a game like that. So yeah, it's a great job.
As I said, it just happened. Lots of the best stuff with this game just happened in the shower, to be honest.
Nice.
It's just shower thoughts. The inception of the is very intertwined. It first started with this idea of the rhythm game where you make a decisive action not on the beat, but before the beat happens. And I made the out control rhythm game with LED strip. It is called Skipper, and it was, I think it's really good game. It just had unfortunate destiny because I made it right before the pandemic. So it didn't go to all the festivals and events. But the groundwork in terms of design philosophy is Skipper. And then I was playing Doom Eternal. I noticed that I am moving rhythmically. It's very fast-paced game, and every weapon in Doom Eternal has kind of a rhythm to it, connected to its reloading time. And I noticed that I'm just reloading on the beat, on the rhythm, and just controlling my direction, where I look and where I shoot, basically. I started to play Doom Eternal like a rhythm game, so I thought I can make this only in 2D, and you do everything automatically, and all you do is you just control your direction, and that's it, and it would be the same game, basically.
Oh, I was going to ask about the origin of the name, actually. No, you just answer that. That's brilliant. Like, that's the thing with rhythm games is rhythm games require precision, right? And there's a lot of instances where people play games that are quite optimal for rhythm games, which makes them especially difficult to enjoy if you don't have the adequate conditions. For example, like input lag on a monitor or on a TV screen or whatever. So a lot of people might get deterred from playing them because of those circumstances. And in the case of making a rhythmish game for Playdate, it's brilliant because the hardware is right there. There's no variance. Like everybody's going to have the same experience. So yeah, it's kind of genius.
Thanks.
Also, another thing that I wanted to ask is that I know that Omaze and are related somehow and thematically or like in the universe or something. Was that the idea since the beginning, or also was that something that at the end was like, why not do this?
I really wanted to make a successor to Amaze because even most of the people don't notice it, but there is a very clear, if not story, then message in Amaze. Because in the end of Amaze, spoilers, in the end of Amaze, you're becoming the eye that you were fighting all along. All the game, you were fighting this evil eye, and in the end, you're become one. And I wanted to make a game with the happy ending this time. And in my head, the universe, this 81 rooms, is the one that the main character of Amaze built. And in the end, you're actually fighting the corrupted version of Amaze guy. And you can tell it by some similarities, but you have to be very attentive to how bosses look in Omaze and how the final boss and its phases look in then it's pretty obvious they are connected.
Wow, that's so well thought out.
Yeah, it's very obscure, but I did it mostly for me, so I know what I'm doing, actually.
Yeah, I really enjoy that part as well. One of the things that I really like about making Playdate games is the community. And I was wondering, like, what was the response to your game? And, like, if you have received any, like, encouraging messages. Also, I guess you have, like, fans from Omaze, and then, it's like, launching is, like, a nice continuity of that, I guess.
Yeah, I'm sneaking in this Discord group, Playdate Squad. I'm usually very quiet there because I also want to hear honest feedback. And yeah, I feel like if I will show up there, people will be more kind than they should be. And yeah, in that Discord group, people really liked it. I was paranoid that I will let some people down because it feels like so many people liked Omaze and they had some kind of level of expectations for the new game, and it's scary. But in the end, I think fans of Omaze really liked Yeah, that's all I heard. And some people on Twitter reached out. They said, like, yeah, it's a good game. But we don't have this response with Playdate so much like with conventional games. Not many people, streaming Playdate games or reviewing Playdate games. That's why I look at this small group of people that played the game, and that's how I made up my mind that, yeah, people like the game. But what's the reality is I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, it's exciting to be a part of a small and growing community. You might not get a bunch of streamers playing it or like making big waves, I guess, but I like the close-knit community that is slowly building up, and everybody's making amazing stuff. Like everybody in the Playdate Squad Discord server is making amazing things that I want to play now. I love it.
But I think with your game, you have much more direct feedback because you have scores, leaderboards.
Yeah.
So you can actually see how are people doing.
Yeah, it's crazy to me that people broke the barrier of like 3-digit scores, and now there's some people doing 300 lines, and I just can't.
So people are playing your game better than you?
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Undoubtedly.
Wow.
And given Playdate's tight-knit community, I wondered how much feedback they got not just after the game was released, but also during development itself.
With Pullfrog, we had like a devlog that we posted, but that felt not so much as a conversation or like a feedback. It was just like us sending things, and we don't have any analytics or anything, so we don't know how many people actually read those. And we had 2 stages of development. One was like before catalog and before the Playdate was with a lot of people. So now that there's more people, with more people doing things for the Playdate, we had more like an opportunity to talk to other developers. But at that point, we didn't have a lot of issues that we wanted to solve. Like there wasn't a lot to talk about because we were like finishing stuff and polishing stuff. But with the new game, definitely we're trying to be more inside of the community of developers as well, inside of Discord server, just to share what we have done and listen to feedback as well.
It also comes back a
Speaking
little
about-
bit to what we were talking about before in terms of playtesting. So Mario and I being like a duo of developers, there's a lot of stuff that we get to bounce off each other. So for the development of Pullfrog, a lot of it was just us coming up with the ideas and giving each other feedback. And it wasn't until the very end of development that we started like reaching out to some people. And mostly post-release, we got a lot of feedback and a lot of bugs. It helped us a lot to get some some bug reports so that we could fix some things that were kind of iffy there. But yeah, we're hoping to be more open this time around.
Yeah, speaking of developer stuff, after release, I also released my tool that I made for It is audio tool, and it ended up being a sequencer, but frame-based sequencer, because rhythm is not time-based, but frame-based. So
Interesting.
every 8 frames, beat happens,
Mm-hmm.
and everything is generated with the internal synthesizers, and sometimes 4 tracks are playing. And for that, I built the external tool where I basically can hear how the synthesizers work in 4 tracks. And it ended up being a sequencer. So if you want to try it out, it's free. It's on the dev forum. It is called SEQ, S-E-Q. And I'm hoping I will work a little bit more on that. And I'm hoping it might be an actual music thingy that people might use for their music compositions.
Wow, that's amazing. Obviously, it seems very intricate. Like the rhythm and the music aspect of is very like entwined with the gameplay. Was that also like ingrained into the game from the very beginning, or did you have any like difficulties or like hurdles developing that?
Yeah, this is something that I figured out on the Skipper, my alt control game. I figured out how I want the rhythm to work. And this time I didn't have any problems with the actual rhythm. I just knew that I wanted to make it frame-based, not the time-based, because it's more accurate. But for that, you have to have your game running very consistent 30 frames per second.
This seemed like a good time to ask JP about the music he created for Pullfrog.
So I'm not a musician or anything of the sort. I have like some basic musical education from when I was young, and I played a little bit of piano, and I was maybe in a band. And then now that I'm saying it, it sounds like I have a lot of musical experience, but I don't know. It feels like that's not like where my thing is. I'm more of an art person. So like the music, it all also like comes back to the Pico 8 version. Pico 8 has a little sequencer, like a tracker way to make music. And you can do some basic like sine wave instruments. So I composed the theme for Pullfrog in that version. And for this version, I wanted to maybe like an updated version that sounded a little bit better. So I started getting into different tools. I used like GarageBand, like very basic stuff. I tried to make like an enhanced version of the theme for Pullfrog. And as I started, I made that very straight up in GarageBand. For the sound effects and all the other music in the game, I bought a little device called the Dirty Wave Mate.
Oh, here's some Playdate music trivia. Lucas Pope also used the M8 to create the music for Mars After Midnight.
It's a tracker-style portable music tool, and it's so elegant and beautiful as a piece of industrial design. And as a music creation tool, is amazing. I never used anything like it. It's based on the LSDJ software, which is like a Game Boy cartridge that people use to make beautiful and awesome chiptune music. This is like an enhanced version of that, and it plays like a Game Boy. It only has like the 4 D-pad keys and an AEB equivalent, and a start and select, and a screen. And I made everything else using that, and I really enjoyed it. I learned how to use it from scratch. It's a different way of thinking because it doesn't work like a usual like audio tool where you maybe connect like a MIDI input and maybe compose your tracks and arrange them around. This works like on a timed basis. So you have to program in your music and program in your instruments, and it's very fun to use. And I loved making the sound effects for Pullfrog using that and some of the alternate tunes for the game. And not being a huge audio person, I don't know a lot of terms and I don't know a lot of like technical stuff. but it worked out and it's in the game. So I'm very happy with how everything came out in the end.
Lucas said it was like composing music using a spreadsheet, but in a good way.
That's exactly what it's like. Yeah.
I have not a question, but like a comment. Maybe you can expand on that. It's about how your death in Pullfrog works. It is actually very satisfying because right after you die, you get some kind of phrase like from fortune cookie. Maybe you unlock new character. Maybe you had a good run and you just beat your leaderboard. So lots of good stuff happening when you die in your game. Do you have to say something to that?
I think one thing is that the game is hard and it's harder for some people. So giving all of these things is to make it easier, but to make it easier to not feel bad about dying, you know? So I think one of the messages was like, make sure not to be dying just to read these messages or something like that. Because yeah, it's one of the fun parts of the game we had since the Pico 8 version. It was just one of those things that we want to make it nicer for people if you're gonna be frustrated because you lose, you know, like you got killed in some way, and that doesn't feel great all of the time. And this is a way to make it feel a little bit better. We have a sense of humor, the two of us, and like between ourselves, we do a lot of jokes internally, and it was just so funny to think about like these things that were there just for comedic effect. And I think we do that a lot, like something that would be fun for us, and we try to put them in places, and the messages was a nice place to put it. And a lot of people have commented on them, like, oh, I really enjoyed this message that showed up. Especially, I think the favorite of everyone is the dessert recipe that is there. But yeah, that's the main thing, like how to make it easier when you lose to feel better and not feel so bad about it.
That's great touch. When we launched our games, we launched at the same day. It definitely felt for me like a season week, for sure. Because our games, while very different, mine is very crank-centric, yours is like using only D-pad, and yours is score chaser. Mine is quite linear and it has an end and that's it. Still, we have lots of similarities. And speaking of similarities, like in your game, basically you have different characters to play the game differently. In my game, it's like you have pickups that changes the mechanics of your character. But even with the general art, we have a thing for the eyes. Did you notice it?
Yes.
Like in my game, I is the main character and the bad guy, and you collect the eyes. Eyes are appearing when you are unlocking the new character, and even on your logo there is an eye. So what's up with the eyes?
I have a proclivity to add eyes in my aesthetic to most of the things I draw. I think is like the very basic answer. The logo of Amano is because when we were coming up with the idea of the studio, or like coming up with names and like a look for it, at the time we were mid-pandemic, very obsessed with making handmade tortillas. And the actual logo of the hand is a hand with the little white thing is supposed to be a tortilla, but it didn't really read that well. That's why there's a little fire below the hand, because it's like the fire cooking the tortilla. But we added a little eye. Then we turned the tortilla into an eye to kind of make it, I don't know, more visually impactful. And because I tend to do that with a lot of the things I do in my artwork. But yeah, in the games we make, you'll tend to see eye-themed situations. Our upcoming game has a little bit of that. Actually, the theme of the game is not even eyeballs, but it just has a lot of that inside. I don't have a very philosophical reason as to why that is, but I enjoy it. I think that have eyes become sentient in a way, right? Like when you add eyes to something, it becomes no longer an object. It becomes a person, a character maybe. So I think that's maybe why I enjoy adding eyes to things.
My games are very geometric, and it is the easiest way to add the character, just to make it an eye. And there is also the thing about the evil, all looking, like everything looking eyes, something like that. and it worked well with the game. Yeah, I'm glad we cleared that up.
I really like in how the character starts out with 2 eyes. So he looks a little derpy and cute, and as he starts getting more eyes, it starts becoming more eldritch-like and like, I mean, maybe not unhuman because it's never a human, but it loses a little bit of that cuteness and starts becoming more dangerous or more fierce.
Yeah.
That's pretty great.
Yeah, like one of the great things was launching amongst I remember when Panic pitches the idea, and we were like, yeah, that sounds perfect. It just felt like the best companion because the games were so different, as you said, but once they were launched, I think it appealed to those two parts of the fan base of the Playdate, right? Like people who wanted one game and people who wanted the other one. And it just felt like a great party to launch the games at the same time. And we were really happy about it.
Yeah, and a stronger launch altogether. Like when we were approached with the idea, we were like, yeah, this is way better than just launching our game separate. Like just
It's out there.
Yeah, it was a great launch.
It was a great launch, and now, a year later, both Oom and Pullfrog are on sale for a limited time. So be sure to pick them both up if you haven't already, and enjoy 2 very different types of action-y, puzzly games. I'm so glad I got to chat with these guys.
This was super fun. Thank you, Krista, and thank you, Gregory, and thank you, Mario, for your time.
Thank you all. I had a really great time.
Yeah, thank you guys. It was really interesting chatting with you. I cleared lots of questions for myself. Now I'm gonna go to unlock the 5th character, maybe 6th.
That's the spirit. Thanks so much for listening, and stay tuned for an all-new season of the Playdate Podcast, which will launch alongside Playdate Season 2. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
The Playdate Podcast was written, produced, and edited by me, Krista Mergen. Cable Sasser and Simon Panrucker composed the theme song. Huge thanks to Tim Coulter and Asher Cabrera for wrangling the podcast feed and working on the website, James Moore for making me an awesome Playdate audio extraction app, Kaylee Stegman for handling social media, and Nevin Mergen, who created the podcast artwork and site design. And thanks as always to everyone at Panic. Learn more about the creators of Oom and Pullfrog via the links in the show notes. And of course, find out everything you need to know about Playdate, including how to buy one for your very own at play.date.
when you were talking in this episode about describing it, I actually was going to say it's Metroidvania.
Okay. I'm glad I tricked you thinking that it is Metroidvania, because it is absolutely not.